what is what is it for you? Like what's the drive towards? What's the ultimate goal for you within your life? Is it just to do this day by day? And if you're doing this every day, you feel good, or is there an outcome? Is there something you'd like to see or achieve through this that you're working towards?
Well, our mission is to revolutionize the way humanity relates to animals. So if you have the point of view that animals have emotions, feelings, thoughts, and consciousness, then it's not so easy to mistreat them because it changes. If this animal, sometimes not myself, but another animal communicator who's talked with elephants in the wild that are being losing their land, and the elephants are very philosophical about it, like they understand it. Do you know what I mean? They understand that they're being destroyed. So I keep losing my train of thought because we're on such high levels here. But uh, what was the
It's kind of
question?
what you're working towards. You
Oh,
mentioned the organization's mission was
yeah,
to build that
yeah. So
connection, so they won't
the
mistreat animals as much.
yeah, like I'd like to revolutionize the shelter system based upon this philosophy because putting animals in solitary confinement is not humane. And it's important. Shelters do the best they can, and they save dogs from dying. So this is not an attack on shelters, but I'd
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the whole system. If humans said, "Hey, that's not the right way for animals even to be in a shelter. We need to have, small groups of animals together, two and three in packs of animals rather than singles. Some animals need singles, but if we could really evaluate what their needs are rather than just putting them in a cell block, where
Mm.
they have no choice and no freedom, and their senses are overstimulated. They're getting just too much sensation, too much smell, too much sound, too much vision of things crossing their path, and they can't do anything about it. So the shelter system is really, that's why when you're, and I want people to rescue dogs from shelters, but some of them have been, traumatized by the experience in the shelter. So we have a whole system for how to work with that trauma and how to reverse it, and we're
Mm.
pretty good at it.
Mm. It's interesting. So we have a rescue dog. The story we've heard, obviously I wasn't there, but is that she lived on the street for at least a year, or I think 6 months to begin her life. And when we brought her home, we originally got a crate because we thought, well, that's what you do. It's the first dog we had, and she hated that crate. She would cry in it. She would to eventually to the point she figured out a way to break out of the crate.
Yeah,
And at that point, I said to my wife and my son, I said, "Well, she's earned her way. She does not want to be in that crate. We're not gonna." She never went in the crate again. We got rid of it, and she's totally
great.
happy. And I bring up that story just because I think like that's an example where if had I been able to realize that sooner, there was probably some messaging coming from her that was pretty clear that was saying, I don't like being confined. I don't want to be in this space. Maybe it was her time on the street, maybe it was something else. But to me, that's an illustration, as you're saying, like that's a living thing who's potentially suffering. And then
Right.
we're making her life worse because we're saying, well, this is what you do with a dog. You just put it in a
Right.
crate, you do
Somebody
that,
told you put them in a crate,
Yeah,
take them home, put them in a crate, and there's a place for a crate, but not the way that you were using it. So I'm not anti-crate. It's just that we have to be able to read the dog and say, is the dog happy in the crate, feeling
right.
safe in the crate, or is a dog suffering in the crate? Get him out of the crate.
Well,
So
it's funny too, Gene, because I was going to say before, like I'm not naive enough to think this isn't true, but you've mentioned a couple times, like for the people that believe or understand that animals have emotions, and that seems like such an interesting statement. Like to think that some people think they don't is kind of crazy if you really
I
think about it,
know.
right? Like that's a strange thing because how could they not? Like they're living beings. We can see that they can suffer. We can see when they're happy. But do you find that a lot? Do you find there's a lot of people out there that don't believe that's true, that just don't think animals actually have emotions?
Well, of course, the people that are drawn to me are the people that are interested in this work. So I'm meeting a lot of people who believe that animals have emotion, but as far as the rest of the world, I think that's a pretty big idea. That's a pretty big, But what's interesting is the science. We have science now to back it up. Whereas 20 years ago, if I made that statement, animals have emotions, you'd say, "Oh, she's crazy," whatever.
It was like
Maybe
really
not you, but some people
wow.
would. Right. So what's been exciting in the last 10 and 20 years is there's the volume of research that I would say proves that animals have emotions. So one example is Dr. Gregory Burns, and he trained his dog to go into an MRI, fMRI machine, those big things
Yep,
that
yep.
we hate, right? To be calm in there with the earplugs and so on. And they were trained to do that. Took a long time to train them, but they would go in and they were able to map the emotional responses, and that not only were they able to map emotional responses, but in the same places that humans have, like where we have anger activation, where we have joy activation, that they could see the same mapping of emotions in awake dogs. So it's the first time we've been able to do experiments on awake dogs, brain experiments on
Wow.
awake dogs, and in a way that's kind to them. So they get treats and everything. So the fMRI showed that dogs have emotional responses to specific stimuli, and it's the very same res- way that our brains are mapped. Like where we have anger, they have anger. Where they have fear, we have fear. Where they have joy, we have joy. And so when people say, "How can animals have emotions?" they forget we are animals,
Yes, yes.
and our emotions come from the same places that the animals come from. It's the same system, the same nervous system, the same brain. I mean, obviously there are differences, but that is, this is part of that misunderstanding, to think that humans are some superior species. Well, we're superior in some ways, but we're inferior in other ways. Like if you look at our nose, if we can smell a cheeseburger, but a dog can smell the bun, the hamburger, the mustard, the lettuce, the person who made the cheeseburger, who packaged it, who wrapped it up, they can smell all of that. So we could, if we used the nose as the indicator of intelligence, we'd be idiots, we'd be
Mm,
morons, right?
right.